Regarding Men, number 45. Middle Ground, Men's Rights versus Feminism. LOL.
Welcome, everyone. This is number 45 of Regarding Men. Yes, 45, that's 7 short of a year. How about that? 45, Paul. And I'm here with Paul Elam, the wonderful, illustrious Paul Elam, who takes care of An Ear for Men and A Voice for Men and Regarding Men also.
And a big fan of POTUS 45 as well.
That's right. There you go. Maybe we should give him the humanitarian today.
Every day.
And the most wondrous Janice Fiamengo, who does wonderful work for Regarding Men and also for the Fiamengo files. And we're just happy to all be together. And today we're going to talk about a show called Middle Ground. Middle Ground. And Middle Ground is supposed to be taking two sides of a difficulty and pulling them together and getting them to find some sort of middle ground, right? Right. So this particular show was on feminism and men's rights activists. Is there a middle ground? And, the show is about 24 minutes, I think, something like that. And it has its ups and downs, and we'll be talking about both of those today. But it also has Kursat Pekgoz, who was one of the men's rights activists there, had a recording he had in his pocket, his cell phone. He recorded the whole 2 hours. So you can go to his YouTube and listen to the real actual footage, or you can watch the 24 minutes of edited footage. It's kind of interesting, and there's so much we can talk about with this. But Paul, and Janice, there was one time when one of the women said, I've heard us feminists talk about how this affects our lives over and over again, but I haven't heard one story from you about how you might have faced discrimination. I wanted to jump through that frickin' microphone. I wanted to jump through there. I wanted to be there and say, the oppression that I've experienced happened really early. In fact, it happened just a couple of days after I was born. Someone cut with a knife my penis and amputated a part of my genitals, which I'll never get back, and has affected my sexuality, affected all kinds of parts of my life. Wow. So that was just the start. Then there was the draft. When I was young, I was a part of the draft. I could have been drafted at any time. I had to worry all the time about going to Vietnam and getting shot. And you talked about someone harassing you and your brother coming in and saving the day, and the guy apologized to your brother, but not to you. Well, guess what? In middle school, I got the hell harassed out of me. I got beat up numerous times. There wasn't anybody to come help me. How about that? Anyway, just those kinds of things I just wanted to jump through. And there's so many others like that they could have said, but nobody said them. So I had to say them now. I feel better already having said them.
Okay, let's play a couple of short clips just to give you a sense of the tone and the content of this program.
I want to note that you brought up children being unequal to adults. I just hope you weren't comparing women to children.
I mean, it was technically a comparison of women and children.
I don't need you to protect me. I just need you not to harm me. I can protect myself. I'm very capable of doing what I need to do. Okay?
The things that stand valid, like that I'm hearing from y'all that are valid to me, come from a place of I am treated unfairly by the system. Versus a lot of the things women are saying, it's also America and the system as well, but a lot of it is harm from men.
How and where?
How and where what?
Where's this harm from men coming from?
Okay, it started when I was young. I'm not gonna talk too long. I was 16, got a bottle thrown at me because I told a boy no. It started when I was in a club, a boy touched me, I said no, he kept touching me, it got to the point he got violent. It gets to the point that the only reason why a man decided to stop touching me in the bookstore I talked about earlier is because he realized my husband was not too far away, and he said, sorry bro, never said sorry to me. That's why, and that's off the top of my head. This is why I get upset, because I'm here to talk about how you feel, but when you just dismiss the fact that women actually have experiences, that's when it seems like it's about more than your rights. It seems like it's about your ego. And that's where I get pissed off. Because how dare you tell another human being that their experiences, what they're telling you right in front of your face, is not valid.
I didn't say they were invalid. I said how and why. I'm trying to understand.
How and why? Because it happened. It happened many times. It happened yesterday. It happened the day before.
Okay, I think some of the things that you guys are touching on, such as the court system and gender roles, are a subject of of patriarchy, and that's
No,
part of what
that's-
women are trying to dismantle, is those traditional gender roles.
Are there any
Very
feminist
systemic.
organizations that have done anything, for example, to challenge bias against men and fathers in
Yes,
the family court system?
absolutely.
Can you please give me like a list of feminist advocacy organizations
Look.
that have engaged in any meaningful advocacy to address those issues? Because there are actually none.
Okay, I know that you came with your little research or whatever. I didn't come with a list of like feminist organizations, but I know actively that there are women's organizations that are trying to dismantle those inequalities.
Just one name, just one
Again, I
organization.
didn't come with a list, my dude.
There are no such organizations.
Again,
And what do you guys think about that program?
Mixed feelings for me.
I know, me
Honestly,
too.
it was
Yeah.
mixed. They did the standard canard that everybody seems to do. They brought an incel on, and not that he was a bad guy or poor representative of some of the issues, but they brought an incel on and they captioned men's rights activist under his name. That's disingenuous.
Right,
Incels are not MRAs, and
Right.
MRAs tend not to be incels.
right.
But this guy wasn't an MRA. He just wasn't. As a matter of fact, that only I recognize one guy, that was Kursat Pekgoz,
Right,
is an MRA, an actual MRA, does activism work.
right,
I didn't know the other two, and one of them was an incel.
right.
So I question their motive for that. I know that it's been going all the way back in the day to, oh God, what website, where the Daily Dot started conflating incels with MRAs with the Elliot Rodger case. Elliot
That's
Rodger
right.
to them was an MRA.
That's right.
And that's where they started this narrative about, and they started this program, The Middle Ground, with women associating violence with MRAs,
Right.
because
Right.
this is the propaganda they've been reading for a long time. Outside of that, they actually drove some MRA points home. They allowed things into the discussion that made feminists look like the overly emotional, reactionary people that they tend to be. And part of that, I think, my guess is, it's just hard to pull a flower off a turd. They have a lot of information. Chris got 2 hours of it, but they didn't have anything to make this drastic hit piece on MRAs. There wasn't anything
Right.
there.
Right.
And so they
Except for some of what
invariably-
Derek said.
some of the truth had to get out.
Yes.
And it did in this. And so that I'm fine with, maybe it could have been a little more honest, but overall they let the MRAs have their say.
Yeah, they couldn't entirely silence them, and yeah, I agree. It when I first started watching it, and I know that Kursat, or Chris as he calls himself, I think in the program, I know he was really unhappy with the way that his words were represented, and also in the way
Yes.
that Derek was presented. The very fact that Derek, the self-declared incel, the very fact that he was on the program, he thought was really irresponsible. And I agree with him. But although I found that what Derek had to say was not particularly outrageous or horrific or anything. There was a young man who talked about how much he loved women. And I guess the most offensive thing he said to a feminist ear was that he wished that the clock could be turned back to a time when people got married and didn't get divorced and had children together and went to church. And
The
you could say,
bastard.
he has a very
How dare he?
rosy view of the pre-1950s world, which many men's rights activists, of course, do not share. But he was hardly a raging misogynist, so fired up by his sexual repression that he wants to kill or harm women in any way. That was pretty clearly not the case with him. Yeah, so overall, I mean, I started watching it and my toes were curling at the very beginning. And I thought this is
Yes.
going to be absolutely unbearable. But as it
Yes.
went on, there were certainly moments that were unbearable or I felt really angry. But overall, I thought the men acquitted themselves pretty well. The women showed that they really didn't have much to say of substance about why feminism is a legitimate standpoint in the world.
Yes.
And so I actually would encourage everybody watching us to take a look at that. It's been viewed by 1.6 million plus viewers. The comments are deeply depressing, I would say.
Yes.
But the program itself tells us pretty much everything we need to know about the conflict between men's rights and feminism.
And I think one of the things, Janice, that I picked up was that the feminists have a hard time hearing even a little bit of what the men are saying.
Exactly.
They couldn't listen. They couldn't listen. And it's like, it's so apparent that they come up with this haughty, arrogant, self-centered kind of stance that they're right and everyone else is wrong. And they have this boundary around them that keeps anyone from being able to share some alternate idea.
Yeah.
It's so clear, and I found that probably the most distressful part of the whole thing, was just this attitude these young women had where it was like, oh, shut up, oh God.
Yeah,
rude. And the arrogance when two things. One, they could have done a better job at a hit piece if they had a guy of the three men who was Asian. So there was diversity among the men there. And he was also very physically fit and attractive, which is counter to the narratives that most feminists would like to have.
Yes.
Kursat's pretty physically fit and attractive too.
Yes, absolutely. So they didn't go after the stereotypes in that way. They didn't try to emulate that. But what I noticed most was the one woman on the left side of the women who said that she had all these negative experiences with men and had been harmed by men. And the Asian gentleman asked, how have you been harmed? Tell me how you've been harmed by men. Right. And she went off the deep end.
Right.
She was not even, I don't think she could even comprehend a world in which he would want to inquire about her pain and her experience. And when he did, she treated him with such indignation. She was so outraged that he asked, tell me what hurt you? And went off on a diatribe as though all men were responsible for her pain, and that he was responsible for being too ignorant about her pain that he even had to ask.
That's one way to go.
Amazing. Yeah, just amazing. And that is the striking thing about that conversation in terms of attitude. The difference in attitude between the three men, even though they were very different in their beliefs between one another, but overall the men versus the women. The women were emotional. They were extremely aggressive and arrogant. Yes. Their stance was always, we're waiting for you to say one thing wrong so that we can jump in and deliver some of the zingers that we've been taught by the social discourse of feminism that we have every right to deliver. So for instance, at one point early on, Derek, the self-described incel, said that women were, this was in response, they kept asking these various questions. And one of them was, do you believe that women and men are different, but equal? That was a sort of odd question. I didn't even know how I would respond to that.
It's a dumb question.
It's a very dumb question. You're supposed to walk forward. They have them all standing at the back of the stage, and then they walk forward if your answer is yes. So 2 of the women walked forward and none of the men. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Derek was saying something about, we don't treat children, we don't give children equal rights, not because we hate them, but because we don't consider them equal, not because we consider them inferior, because we love them and we see them as different, very different in their roles. And so, that's it's an interesting thing to say. I mean, you'd need a lot of time to unpack it. One of the women, the woman who identified, I think, as a person of color, a woman of color, then later on said, did I hear you say that women are equal to children? And he said, well, technically I made that comparison. She immediately cut him off. We are not children. That wasn't what he said. He was trying to make a fairly actually sophisticated point, but very difficult to make in that kind of a format, especially when you don't have a fully developed discourse that you can draw on that enables you to make that point in any kind of shorthand. And, and she immediately then started attacking you. We are not children. We are perfectly capable of looking after ourselves. We do not need you to protect us. And she went on and on and on, which was amazing, because then the whole rest of the discussion was about women demanding that men do things for them.
To be protected.
And they actually explicitly said, we need you to do this. We need you to be allies. We need you to call out your friends when they engage in locker room talk. We need you to stop, doing, So, well, which is it then? You don't need men, or you do need men?
Is what got me about those women. And it literally, I was just fuming by the end of it, because all this was at one point was a supposedly open discussion, but a discussion about how men should be under control of
Yes,
women's direction.
Absolutely.
They should be calling the shots on how men talk to each other, how they talk to women, how they talk to themselves. It should be a woman in charge. Now, imagine if Derek had said, well, then we'll take the reverse of that. We need to instruct you on what to give us.
Yeah.
We need to tell you how to be our allies.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that wouldn't have flown.
No, and he never said anything like that. None of the men said anything close to that, yet they were the targets of rage. And that is the thing, those men, they're walking on eggshells, and they are legitimately, I think, trying to articulate a sense of what would be a fair, a fair society of men and women cooperating and living together. They're really trying to do that, honestly. The women are just mouthing talking points that they got from feminism, and they're extremely self-confident and even arrogant, as you said, in doing so. So the difference in attitude between the two is amazing. But that's a huge disadvantage for the men in many ways. They don't have a socially approved language to talk about the things that bother them. They've had to work these things out mostly for themselves. I mean, this is why, sites like An Ear for Men, a Voice for Men rather, are so incredibly helpful and important, and so dangerous to feminists. But so these guys have had to work these things out for themselves and struggle to articulate. And they know that if they say a single phrase that isn't quite right, that the feminists are going to jump on it. They've already got all their talking points ready. But the upside of that is that these men have actually thought through the issues. They have actual evidence. They are able to make arguments. They can do more than simply emote and tell saccharine personal anecdotes about how I'm so sexually attractive that men can't keep their eyes off me, and I am terrorized every day of my life because I have to think about what I wear before I go out the door. That was one of the main points that the woman of color had to say about how persecuted she is, that she has to think about what clothes she puts on before she goes out the door. Men are so entitled.
Sure that weighs heavy on her as she's putting her thong on.
Yeah, I'm sure it really does. Men are so entitled that men don't have to think about such things because, of course, men don't have to worry about physical violence on the streets, do they?
No.
This is how blind this woman is. Right. And, when it comes right down to it, what were the issues that the women articulated as serious women's issues that feminism has to work on and these men should be aware of? She talked about the tax on tampons. I have to give it to the producers of that show for putting that one in there. That was the only specific real issue, I suppose, if you could call it that they could come up with. The others were, we didn't get the vote until just recently. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. And what were the others? Women are discriminated
against. Well, the wage gap. They brought up the wage gap. 80 cents on the dollar canard that always obligatory talking point for feminists.
That was it. But it's true. But basically they had nothing, whereas the men were actually articulating real issues, especially Kursat, who talked about health outcomes for men. He talked about discrimination against men in family courts. He talked about discrimination against men in criminal courts related to sexual assault. He talked about discrimination against actual material discrimination against men in university education, and he knows, of course, intimately about all those things. So here were the men the men knew what they were talking about. The women had nothing, and that's
And they
the
even
effect.
had one of the feminists nodding when they were talking about the discrimination in family courts. One of the
Yes.
feminists was nodding her head because that's one of the ones you simply can't deny
Mhm.
that it exists. But still, this was a wine fest to me
Yeah.
for third waivers who really don't have real issues.
I sure don't.
I mean, again, I hate to tag them with privilege because I think that's overdone on men. You know, everybody has hardships in life and nobody's exempt. Women aren't exempt from hardships. And I also want to back up for a moment and say that what was the incel's name again?
Derek.
Derek. It was inartful, his articulating about children and the rights that we don't give them. He opened the door to get his ass kicked on that one.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate, but the argument was intellectually honest.
Yes.
We have exempted women from conscription
Exactly.
and from selective service because we protect them.
Exactly.
Bingo.
And so what he was saying was true. It was just rhetorically a bad door to open for her to come in there and destroy him on comparing women to children. You know, and I would have I'm glad it was Derek there and not me, because I would have made the comparison a lot more stark. Well, socially, this is how we socialize the sexes. I mean, again, this stuff doesn't happen with women in a vacuum. It never has. It's a cooperation between the sexes, and it puts them in a very childlike role. It really does.
Yep.
And those feminists on that stage were acting that role out.
They were, exactly. That's
Totally
it. They
and completely.
demonstrated it in practically in every interaction. The minute they were challenged in any way, or even just perceived themselves to be challenged, it wasn't even necessarily evident that they were being aggressively challenged. Even if they were just asked to provide some evidence for their sweeping assertions, the first response was either to attack. Are you saying my experiences are not legitimate? Are you invalidating my personal experience?
Like that.
Nobody ever suggested that, but that was one of the first responses. Of course, they've learned that from feminism too. And the other was to denigrate and mock. At one point, Kursat was making the point that there are no feminist organizations or I don't think he was even making that point. I think one of the feminist women, the other two, the non-women of color, I can't keep them distinguished in my mind, but one of them was saying that feminists also work energetically to deal with men's issues.
To help men, yes.
There are many feminist organizations.
Oh yeah, that's all they do.
Concerned, they're genuinely committed to equality. So she was trotting out that old canard that we've heard so many times before, and Kursat said, name one. Which ones? And that was a challenge, of course.
I didn't bring it with me.
That's the best moment. That moment for me sums up what it's like to try to have a discussion, a mature adult discussion with a feminist ideologue. Oh, I didn't bring my little research. I know you came with your little research, she said. She started to mock him and that's so there it is. And he asked her again, okay, just name one organization. And she couldn't, of course, because there aren't any.
Kursat did a good job. He did. He did an even better job than you saw in the flick, because if you listen to the 2 hours, you see that he brought up a number of issues that they never got on the tape. Same thing with Derek, though. Derek, this one thing, in fact, I think it was around the issue of children, or it was before that, but he was talking about the difference between men and women, and he had this pretty good little rant on testosterone and estrogen, which they cut out. They cut that out, and they made him look dumb, basically. That really pissed me off. And what also just completely blows my mind is how much crap this guy Derek is getting in the comments. How people hate him. It's like, this is a guy, he's a little sad, but he seems to be a good kid. He's not a terrible kid. He's not really very attractive. He's not, super bright, but he's trying to, make his way, and he's getting all these horrible comments.
He's not super bright, but I tell you what, he isn't half as stupid as 90% of the people in the comments to that video.
Bingo to that.
I
Because
absolutely
I thought Derek,
agree.
I didn't have much a problem with anything he said. You know, it's like, okay. It was like, he's a good kid. Why all the crap? And I think all the crap comes from not wanting to have any kind of compassion for men and boys.
Right. Yes, of course. He presents in a way that both men and women don't
Can
like.
attack. They can attack.
Even though
that.
in many ways he presents exactly as the feminists claimed in that program the post-feminist man should present, which is he's supposed to be in touch with his feelings. They went on and on about that. He's supposed to be able to cry. He's supposed to be able to express his, fears and longings, etc. Well, Derek was doing that to a large extent, but it's obviously completely unacceptable. And that was the other. I mean, the thing that's so interesting about that program, well, there's so many things, but the contradictions are rife through everything those three women said. And one of them, of course, was that favored talking point of feminists. Men need to learn to cry. Men need to be in touch with their feelings, because if they're not, then they repress them. And then that turns into anger. And then that turns into violence. Isn't it a wonderfully simplistic world? But then when it became obvious through everything else they said, that everything men say, if they're actually expressing their feelings, is totally unacceptable and must be curtailed or called out or condemned.
Good point.
Exactly to a point. I've made this point 1,000 times in these discussions, and I'll make it again. When men give feminists what they claim they want in behavioral terms out of men, it's used to marginalize and reject them. The moment they comply with the feminist edict, you need to express your feelings more. You need to be more emotionally vulnerable. You need to say what's on your mind and talk and communicate. When they do that from earnest, from the heart, the first thing they get is a knife in the back from feminists who were demanding that behavior.
Yes.
And from the society at large, as we see in the comments, the disgusting comments to that video.
Yeah, and I'll add on one more thing to that, Paul, and that is every time the feminists say men need to deal with their feelings, it's just such a marker for them being so egocentric and so self-centered that they think everyone else should be like them. Hey, wake up, guys. Everyone else is not like you.
I hope, particularly. And I don't know if it happened I didn't hear all 2 hours of the secretly recorded version of this, so I don't know if it happened, but I wanted badly for one of those guys to sit up and say, I don't need a woman to tell me my state of being or to tell me how to act or how to feel or how to express it. I don't need that from women.
Right.
Thank you very much. I'll get that from myself and other men, and you can kindly butt out, and I won't tell you as women how you're supposed to act and feel.
And what would be the response from them, Paul?
That would be being expressed as anger. That would be being angry and blaming and attacking women. So see, that's the thing. The men are so limited in the emotional range that they're allowed. Yeah, scared too. But I mean, anyone who has presence of mind and has been following these kinds of debates over the last few years knows that there's a whole range of things men are not allowed to say in those kinds of forums. Women can do whatever they want. They can cry, they can get angry, they can blame, they can castigate, they can make sweeping, damning assertions. And it's all seen as, well, it's, coming out of their experience, and that must not be denigrated. But the men have to be so careful. And I think actually Kursat came close to saying that, Paul, when he said at one point that I don't have a problem talking with other men about feelings or issues, but I do have a problem becoming a mouthpiece for feminist ideology, which is essentially what you're demanding that we all do. I mean, it was so obvious. At one point they were saying, you have to call out your friends when you hear locker room talk. And the Asian guy, Zach was his name, he said, well, if there's nothing wrong with that, and if men are just making jokes and expressing themselves, why should that be repressed? This was right after there had been a conversation about how repressing feelings leads to anger, which leads to violence. So he's mimicking the very feminist ideology that he was hearing, I think, quite cleverly. And they said, oh, no. that's unacceptable. There's nothing acceptable about locker room talk. I mean,
Well, and they come by it, and sometimes I look at these women, and I don't know if I want to see them as vindictive actors on ideological grounds, or whether I see them as victims of brainwashing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember 10 years ago, I'm sure, Tom, you remember Christopher Kilmartin, Division 51 feminist, wrote an article about a golf club where there was a ice sculpture of a woman in the men's area. This was just a guy's area, and she was peeing vodka.
Oh my goodness!
And so they could stick their shot glass between her legs and fill it up. And I thought it was funny as hell.
I thought it was
Christopher
too.
Kilmartin said that's a preamble to rape.
Oh, of course.
That's been their ideology all along.
Yeah.
That just men clowning around in their own environment without looking over their shoulder for women to judge and moralize about their behavior, just have a good time. I doubt any woman was raped in that room that day, but you never know. But this is what they've been listening to.
Yes.
For decades.
You're right. Yeah,
Yes.
I know. Yeah.
True.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it gives them their self-confidence that they simply channel all this nonsense through. It gives them their self-confidence, but ultimately, of course, when they're in a forum like this where they're being challenged by men, even in the very gentle and quite hesitant way they were being challenged, and they realize that there's nothing behind it. They must realize that
Maybe
at some
not, Janice.
level.
Maybe not.
Maybe not, but
I mean, when you're brainwashed, you're literally brainwashed.
Something?
yeah.
I used to not fall in line with all the extremes, but I used to buy the basic assumptions of feminism,
Right.
About women and men and society. I really believe that our society was defined by a culture that held women back,
Right.
and so that men could advance.
Yes.
And of course, that's not anything like our society. But even as a critical thinker, I mean, you just hear this from the time you're born over and over again, and it becomes a part of who you are. And it's kind of painful getting out of it. It was painful for me to get out of it. I could imagine how it might be painful. I've often wondered about Janice's experience going back as a feminist back in the day and then waking up, and how difficult that can be.
Yeah, I think it's more difficult for men in the sense that men don't really know. So there's a lot of self-doubt probably, and you're trying to figure out, well, what is really true? For the women, I don't know. I don't have a lot of sympathy for feminist women in this day and age. I really don't. They are brainwashed, obviously. But I think any honest woman, like those three, what are they? One was a poet. What did she call herself? Writer, poet, and teaching artist. I think that was the woman of color. Another one works as a vet assistant. That's maybe a little bit different. But
I didn't know if she was an assistant or a secretary or receptionist. She was in the animal services industry.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. These women, these are privileged women, and any honest woman, if the worst thing you've got is you got guys catcalling you occasionally and asking for your phone number. That was the major source of grievance, that the guys asked for her phone number and then were disappointed when she didn't give it to them. That to her was male entitlement or something. I don't know. And one man was hurt, but he was also entitled. I mean, she wasn't sure what he was, but.
And he'd actually get upset that she wouldn't give him the phone number.
Yeah. And so again, there he is. He's expressing his emotions, but that's not allowed in that case.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't see the painfulness for these women. These women, if they had any intelligence or self-awareness or interest in world history or anything, have got to see that they are some of the most fortunate beings who ever lived. And
Yes.
I don't know. I really
I'm with you.
Yeah,
with you, too.
it's extraordinary, the anger that they're able to express, the indifference, the rage, the defensiveness, the all those demands about what men have to do to be allies to them. It's sad. I mean, it is at base a stunting. They are experiencing a stunting of their humanity,
Correct.
a total,
And their maturity.
yeah, and their
Yes,
maturity, their empathy for others has been eviscerated, even while they pride themselves supposedly on feeling so much for those who suffer. It's really sad and kind of scary to see, but it certainly does give us a amazing snapshot on gender relations today to watch that 24 minutes. I really do recommend it, and I actually
Yeah.
think that it's good that it's out there,
I think
despite
so
the
too.
fact that the comments are enough to make you want to kill yourself.
Well, and the comments are as important to read as watching the video, because that also paints a very clear picture of where we're at
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
society.
Sure
Yes,
does.
exactly.
It's depressing.
The
It is.
gleeful malice shown towards one young man whose only failure is that he does not live up to the ideal of masculinity that supposedly our whole worldview is supposed to be about reconstructing and critiquing. He is not strong. He is not sexually magnetic. He's a lonely guy that wants a
Yes.
companion and feels he can't have
Yes.
one. And for that,
Yes.
I don't know why the hell anybody would feel right mocking him. And yet thousands, it seems, of people do. Wow.
And I'll lay
Sad.
you odds, it's sad to say, that a really big piece of the people mocking him are men who are just like him.
Huh. Huh.
Sometimes the only way we feel better is to put somebody else down.
Yeah, that's sad but true.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, surprisingly interesting program.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are we getting near the
watching
end?
and- Yeah.
Can we give the puta to the human race, please?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what should we put on the Buddha's head for the human race?
Put a globe.
Yeah.
That's the last time.
That's about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Looks like the human race gets it twice.
That's good. That's fine. That's easy. I can do that.
And
Good discussion, guys.
We'll give Kursat our humanitarian award for
Indeed. Nice job,
I'll give
Kursat.
it to all three of them. Let's
all
give it
three
to
of them.
Derek too, and I didn't get the other
Good
guy's
point.
name.
Yeah, Zach. Yeah,
Zach.
I agree with you. You know, there were some fumbles, but you know, I totally agree with you that at least these guys were trying to be intellectually honest and real in that conversation, which I really can't say about the other three.
And I'll tell you what, that they took some courage to do what they did.
It sure as hell did. I wouldn't have
No.
wanted to be there. I wouldn't have done as well. I don't think that's a really difficult kind of
It's
conversation
very
to
difficult.
be in.
So my hat's off to all three of you.
Yeah, it would have been nice if you were there, Janice. It would have been nice to have a woman
been
on
Well, it
that.
would have been
Great.
good to
Oh,
have a
God.
woman. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, but they
Yes,
wouldn't even
indeed.
have thought
That
about
would
that.
have been potent.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be able to treat you like they
They
treated
weren't
those
they weren't
boys.
going to have that though.
No, that'd
No
be too
way.
complicated.
Indeed, that would make things completely go haywire.
Mhm.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Until
yeah.
the next one.
Till the next
Until
one.
next time.
That's right. Y'all take care then.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.